In this world, there are monster hunters. The weakest were the steel ones, followed by the copper ones, then silver, gold, and platinum, and the most legendary of all, the mithril. These hunters, they defeated several monsters to save the villages and fought against dangerous creatures, and in that they brought a lot of fame and prestige. The platinum ones, they were extremely rare and there were not even 20 in the whole world. And as for the mithril hunters, people said that there were only 3 in the entire universe. Our protagonist, he greatly wished to be a high-level hunter, but his desire was not riches and much less prestige like other people. What he wanted, in fact, was something else. His group was very weak, and when he mentions that he wants to take higher missions, the leader of the group gets scared. The wolf girl said that they did not have enough strength. Then a spoiled rich girl called Maria appeared to keep mocking them. The girl kept belittling our hero's group because they were bronze level, while she was already silver level. The girl, she would not stop jeering, saying that he looked more like a slave than a hunter. That is because the low-level hunters, they did activities that nobody wanted to do, such as, for example, carrying sacks of flour, cleaning stables, and even washing clothes. All of these were activities that our dear protagonist Lewin did. The guy arrived home tired, always because of his CLT job, and as a reward, he had only 2 or 3 coins per day. That was barely enough to survive. Then he said that things would not continue like this anymore. The guy would not spend the rest of his life living a mediocre life, but it was then that a girl holding a compass came up to him. She said that he was the right person and ended up pulling Lewin by the clothes. When the guy turned around, he realized that there was a beautiful red-haired elf, and with a smile, the girl said that he would be the savior of the universe. The guy already gets all grumpy, saying that that girl there must have eaten something spoiled. But for us to reach that day, we need to go back a little in time. Lewin's story begins in the real world, with him looking at demon flags there in the temple. I think you are demons, guys. If not, sorry about that. He was holding a baseball bat, and he was motivated, because today was the final. At that moment, he heard someone calling his name. This was the master, the double caterpillar. The old man asks if his Lewin would play the final, and the big boy said yes. Then the master says that if he loses, he should enter the temple. At that moment, a girl shouts for Lewin. When he turns around, he sees the girl who also lived there in the temple, and she was brushing her teeth. Lewin, he starts teasing, asking what got into her to wake up so early like that. However, she would like to give a lucky amulet, and ends up handing a keychain to him. The guy asks what that was, because it was a very ugly keychain, and the girl gets angry. Looking closely, Lewin did not know if that there was a hippopotamus or a dragon. That definitely is not a hippopotamus, man. She said that it was for him to see it as if it were a lucky amulet. And looking at her face, it is possible to notice that she got a little embarrassed. The boy then said that he would take very good care of this amulet. He keeps teasing her, asking if by any chance the girl had become shy. Then Sophia gives a kick in his back, sending the boy far away. The old man wished that he would return safe and sound, and he still says that he cheers for his victory. Of course, Luan was happy, and after grabbing the bat, he gives a smile saying that he will win with style. Thus they say goodbye, and the old man makes a face saying that he is sure that he will be the winner. This was the grand final of the high school baseball championship. That one there was the best pitcher of the tournament, and he was facing exactly Luan, who was the best batter. Everyone was going crazy because it could be the final play. The pitcher prepares himself, and they keep staring at each other, and at that moment the pitcher ends up making the throw. The ball goes looking like a cannon shot, but Luan is the one who plants his foot on the ground and prepares for the hit. He hits it squarely with the bat, and the ball goes toward the pitcher as if it were an even stronger shot. The ball passes very fast. It rose so much that a child in the bleachers managed to catch it. This play, it was rare, and it was known as homie run. Everyone goes crazy because the high school student had just done something unbelievable. With a smile, he hears the announcer say that he will become a great professional. The night was already arriving and he was going home. Our protagonist, he was very anxious to tell his master how the match went. At that moment, he ends up taking a huge scare. That is because Sophia was behind him calling the boy slow, provoking Lewin. She said that he will have to make dinner for her, and he provokes back, saying that her face is dirty. While they were climbing the stairs, Sophia said that they broadcast his match at her school, and the guy gets all cocky asking if there was not a cute girl for her to introduce to him. But Sophia said that he only won thanks to the lucky amulet. Ah, of course. Yes, I only won because of that amulet. For sure. Sophia, she gets angry saying that she will not give him any more presents, and the big guy runs away. When opening the temple door, he informs the master that he had arrived. However, his master was fallen and there was someone close to him. It seemed that the old man was lifeless, and the masked man, very suspicious, was there nearby. Sophia, she had not yet realized that her master had fallen and perhaps died. And upon entering the room, she is shocked by that scene. The girl, she keeps screaming, asking if her master was okay. And the poor Luan, he did not know if he ran or if he protected Sophia. The hooded man says that this boy has nothing to do with this, but he realizes that Luan, he was rushing toward him. Our protagonist, he does this holding his baseball bat. The man thinks this is a boredom, and giving a shout, Luan tells Sophia to run away. But since she was too scared, she has no reaction at all. Then he shouts very loudly, telling her to run as fast as possible. Desperate, she runs away, saying that she will call for help. Luan, he did not know what this man with strange clothes was doing there in the temple, and besides that, he did not know if his master was alive or dead. However, guys, he would need to defeat this intruder, and all he tries to do is strike very hard with the bat. The man begins to use a strange magic, and the boy, he even imagines that he was seeing things. At that moment, he summons a crystal in his hands. Luan does not really know what is happening. At that instant, the man disappears. When he realizes it, the guy was already very close to his body. Luan, he tries to dodge, but the enemy almost touches his chest. At that moment, he gets startled, because this enemy of his was exactly the same as our hero. The only difference was the hair color. The boy asks, "What the heck is this?" At that instant, the dimension begins to break like glass, and he ended up falling into a magical portal. The guy was desperate, thinking that he would die. The strangest thing of all is that he was not feeling any difference in gravity, so he ended up falling on the ground. When looking forward, he saw a skull with a giant insect. He thought that he was inside a nightmare. The guy even asks himself, "What the hell is happening?" He was feeling something slimy in his hand, and when he looked back, he saw that there was a giant insect. "I am sorry to tell you, my friend, but you are screwed." When he looked up, he saw that there was not only one, but thousands of eggs, and the one that he had touched started to explode, and from inside came out a very ugly creature, and very ugly indeed. Several eggs started and the monsters went toward him. One of the creatures jumps on his arm and ends up stinging him. Giving a shout, he throws the creature away, but his arm was already doomed because of the poison. He realized that he was getting surrounded. What a beautiful day for our protagonist, right? Wonderful day. The only weapon he had was his baseball bat. Because of that, he ran there to try to grab it, and with that weapon he begins to destroy the monsters. But since the creatures were many, he had to flee until reaching a place that seemed to have no exit. Our protagonist, he sees that he was surrounded and more monsters were coming from behind. Then he thought, "Since I am screwed anyway, I will jump into the water." The creatures on the surface seemed to be hydrophobic. However, that water was full of leeches, and he ended up being bitten. Because of that, he had to swim to the other side and begins to kick the creatures. These leeches were also poisonous, and he even started to lose his strength. The keychain that he had received from Sophia had fallen from his pocket. And meanwhile, he thought, "What did I do to deserve to end up in this place?" At that moment, he realized that the lucky amulet was next to the baseball bat, and after picking that little creature, he saw that it had damaged the top of the head. He even remembered Sophia at that moment and also remembered their master. If it were not for that guy, he would not be in this situation. But thinking about it would not help at all. All motivated, he said that he needed to find a way to return to the surface. He leans on the bat to stand up, and while he was all motivated, he could not even expect that there was a giant insect behind him. The creature's saliva falls on the bat. At that moment, Luen realized that he was more screwed than ever. Now it is just jumping into the water to clean the underwear, and life goes on. The monster tries to strike, but he dodges. He jokes, saying that it even looks like a giant tick. From afar, he observes the entrance of a small cave. Then he begins to run in that direction desperately. The creature tries to chase him, but he does some somersaults trying to reach that crack. With great effort, he entered there inside, and since the monster was much bigger, it could not enter. However, the claws almost reach him, passing very close between his legs. The boy keeps trembling, saying that that was close. Our protagonist almost gets prevented from having children in the future. The monster Lily was not playing around, and after 2 hours, the creature finally went away. His arm was purple and throbbing with pain. He remembers that it was because of the bite and looks for other wounds. Without much time to waste, he starts looking for an exit. However, he was already getting weak, but deep down he was seeing a light, and that was exactly where he was going. However, it seemed that there was the shadow of a person. Luan immediately starts shouting for help, even thanking God for not being alone. But when he gets there, he is surprised. It seems that this boy didn't have a single minute of peace, guys. The guy was face to face with a giant skeleton being controlled by an insect. The creature starts screaming in his direction, and after trying to bite him, Luan ends up managing to dodge. The boy realized that it really was the parasite controlling that body, and with his baseball bat he strikes the creature. At that moment the thing shatters, and using his last remaining strength, he fights with that monster. Finally, he manages to break free. However, the monster keeps coming at him, and to avoid having his face bitten, he offers his own arm. The pain was very intense, so he lets out a loud scream, and in desperation ends up grabbing a stone. He strikes the skeleton with all his strength, throwing it away, and using that same stone he begins to smash the monster, until finally nothing is left. However, our big boy was completely destroyed, and still ends up with a desolate face, without any hope. After all, right in front of him there were several other monsters. If it was already difficult dealing with one monster, imagine dealing with several. There was no chance of surviving. He even said that it would be better to surrender once and for all, and because of that he starts running toward the monsters. In the middle of the way, he thinks that it would be better to fight until the end. He would not give up, so he headbutts the monster, but is also bitten on the leg. With his elbow he crushes one of the monsters, but another jumps on top of him. I think I have never seen a protagonist get beaten this badly at the beginning of a story. The more time passed, the more monsters appeared. Then a flame begins to form, and it was exactly that keychain he had received from Sophia that was releasing those flames. It seemed that the little doll had come to life, and Luen thinks he was going crazy because he heard a voice coming from that little doll. Frightened, he asked what that was. However, the doll begins to transform into a spirit of fire. It even asks our protagonist to hold it, because he was on the verge of death. "I'm going crazy." That was the doll speaking. That flame kept talking to him, saying that it would save him, and for that our big boy only had to touch that flame. While he ran desperately, the monsters almost managed to capture him, but he reaches that flame at the last second, and a very strong energy begins to emerge, throwing the monsters backward. The boy was holding the baseball bat with spiritual powers. Not even Lewin was believing this, guys. The monster came toward him, and he said that it was time to test his new power. Thus, he manages to split that monster in half. The boy is surprised by this new power. Yeah, my son, it seems that luck is turning around, because until now the monsters were beating you and the next moment you were the one getting beaten. Motivated, he said that he would manage to return home, but for that he only needed to defeat a few more monsters. He rests the bat on the ground, and we see that it was pulsing with energy, and with his eyes shining he said that he would smash all the monsters as much as necessary. Here the guy was already thinking he was a superhero, right? He had already defeated several creatures and that was very exhausting. Looking at the bat, he asks what that was. In fact, the sensation was difficult to explain, but it was as if an energy was flowing through his entire body. At that moment it ended up changing shape. The big boy was surprised. That was because the bat had transformed into a kind of very large flame dragon. The kid lets out a scream thinking he would be devoured, but then his baseball bat ended up eating those monsters. Wait a second, it's devouring all the creatures we defeated. It literally eats all the monsters and ends up returning to its original state, and after the flames go out, the big boy comments that it ended up looking like the bat was made of metal. At that instant he felt a very strong pain in his heart. He even fell to the ground from so much pain. It seemed that the poison had spread throughout his entire body, but then he saw that the flames were healing his arm. He didn't only end up with his arm healed, but every part of his body, until he became completely good as new. Even though he was tired, his body was already recovered. Looking at the baseball bat, he stares at it and says that it was thanks to the little bat, but that pendant of his had stopped responding. He already called the pendant a bat, a hippopotamus, and a dragon. Make up your mind, son. After some time walking inside the cave, he started to feel very hungry. He noticed some glowing mushrooms and wondered if he should eat them or not. Their appearance looked like poisonous mushrooms, but if he didn't eat them, he would be very hungry and die. In the end, he said that he would rather die poisoned than die of starvation, and ended up eating the mushrooms, thinking the taste would be horrible. However, the guy made a funny face, saying that the flavor actually wasn't that bad. If you add a little salt, it becomes delicious. After that, he began hunting several mushrooms like those in the cave. He even said that he should eat something healthier, and being very thirsty, he thought he should try the water from that lake. And as expected, he didn't have a second of peace. Another monster had appeared, and with the help of the baseball bat he defeated that monster without much effort. He even kept wondering what kind of bizarre power that was. After that, guys, several days passed and he couldn't find the exit. No matter where he went, he always stopped in the same place. Then Lewin realized that maybe he would have to return to that initial point where he fell, there in the nest of insects. That disgusting place could be the exit, but there was one problem. A giant monster stayed there, the same one he had escaped from by entering the hole. But now he could defeat that creature because he had the power of the bat. He thinks he is already very screwed and that it wouldn't hurt to try. And what he most wanted to know was who that man was that threw him into the cave and why the person had the same appearance as him. But he would not find the answer if he stayed still. Clenching his fist, he said that he needed to get out of there no matter the cost. Because of that, he ends up returning to the level of the insects. When he arrives at that place, he steps on a bone by accident, making a loud, tense noise. He knew that would attract the monster's attention. Then he starts walking very slowly until he sees a hole from where he had fallen. He imagines that if he climbed there again, he would come out back in his master's temple. However, he realized that the ground was somewhat slippery. Looking down, he saw that he was standing on top of that monster. Besides being unlucky, Luan was also a very slow idiot, for the love of God. At that same moment, the monster attacks him, throwing him away. He falls to the ground and starts to feel his body tingling. The whole time the monster was there beneath him, and letting out a scream, the giant insect charges forward. Luan tries to strike the monster's face, but only grazes its leg. He notices that it caused a wound, and with a smile he realized that he might be able to win. The monster tries to attack him again, but Luan dodges the blow and his eyes were even shining. He realizes that it was the right moment to launch the counterattack. The creature begins to scream. That was because it had taken a heavy strike right on the leg. He realized that it caused very great damage, and holding the baseball bat, he calls the other one to come at him. Several smaller insects try to attack him, but he eliminates them one by one. While he was distracted, he ended up being struck in the chest. The attack was brutal. He thought that he would not be able to survive after that blow, and to free himself, he ripped off the monster's leg with a single strike. Right after that, he falls to the ground. Kneeling, he realized that he was losing a lot of blood. If the monster tried to strike him again, he would certainly die. The big boy was already about to surrender, but then he heard Sophia's voice telling him to fight until the end. He managed to see the girl, and she said that he should not give up, no matter what. Frightened, he asked if she was okay, and Sophia repeated, saying that he should stand up. That was because she and his master were waiting for him. The bat's flames become even more intense, and he ends up grabbing the bat again. At that instant, the flames begin eliminating all the monsters. He had released a new transformation in forming an aura. He said that he was tired of those mediocre insects. Because of that, he would eliminate all the monsters. Thus, our big boy launches his final attack. This would be his last strike, and like that he manages to annihilate that giant insect. Lewin collapses without energy. Now he could finally return home through that hole. At least that was what he imagined. Poor guy, he was completely deluded. He realized that the bat was still devouring the monsters and started eating that giant insect. At that moment, he also saw that every time the bat ate the monsters, he gained more energy. When the energy entered his body, he began to feel a terrible pain, but his wounds were healed and that hole in his chest had closed. Even though it hurt a lot, it was still worth it. Feeling energy running through his body, he said that he was getting stronger, and so he begins climbing through that hole from where he had fallen until he finally comes out outside and realizes that the sun was blazing. It was extremely hot, and it was not his master's temple. Looking at the horizon, he saw that there was a desert. The innocent guy even celebrated, saying that a desert is better than a cave. A few hours later, Lewin had already realized that he spoke nonsense and that he was even dehydrated from so much thirst. There was nothing to eat and much less to drink. There was no water at all. He even started to miss that cave, but when he remembers the skeletons, he becomes afraid. Yeah, my son, there's nowhere to run. Both sides are bad. Without energy and dehydrated, he falls to the ground. Could it be that the humanity of this world was extinct? At that moment, he hears someone's voice saying that there was a boy fallen on the ground. When he notices, there was a fox girl and a man looking at him. The girl asked Lewin to stop crying. That was because the poor protagonist was in tears. They even think that this boy is very strange, and the poor guy was crying so much that his nose even started to run. The man said for them to sit and talk a little more, but the fox said that they should not take this boy because he was very whiny. But in response, the man said that it was she who decided to go there to rescue him. Making a grumpy face, the little fox said that it was all right, and thus agrees to help this crybaby baby. At the end of the day, they end up setting up the camp and make a cooked soup. When looking at that Lewin, he begins to drool and even comments that it has been days since he ate anything. He looks like a wild beast dying of hunger. Finding it strange, she asks for how long he had not eaten, and the guy said that it has been 5 days that he has not eaten anything. Frightened Chloe, she said that this is very extreme and that he should eat something soon. Aries he only observes. He says that maybe he is only alive because of the absorption of monsters. The two travelers ask if that is some magic of his. Wait a second, you mentioned magic, so magic exists in this world? No girl, that thing you did there was artificial intelligence. The girl even asks where he came from to ask questions like that, but it was very difficult for him to explain. At that moment, the man interrupts, offering a little soup. While the big boy ate, he ended up explaining his entire story. He said that when he woke up, he was already in this different world. And he also said that he can heal himself when the bat from the baseball bat ate the monsters. The man says that this is a very unusual ability, but what interested this man was his ability to devour the undead. Hitting the bat on the ground, he said very proudly that he defeated several undead, which were those skeletons. The girl found that very interesting, and Aries imagined that maybe he could use this power of his for good, since it was a very useful power. He even says that maybe it would be good to use his power to defeat a certain someone. Standing up, the man wishes good night and says that if Lewin did not have somewhere to go, he could travel together with them. Chloe asks Aries what he is thinking by making an invitation like that, but Aries he was very serious. With that, Lewin he gives a smile and accepts. Of course, the little girl, she became grumpy because she was bad-tempered and annoying. During the trip, they were collecting some cactuses to eat later. All excited, he said that this girl knows many things. Chloe mentions that she learned because crossing the arid desert required basic knowledge. He kept thinking that she was very cute, making a strange face. He even says that she reminds him a lot of his little sister, making the fox irritated. Thus he begins an adventure together with this group. He ended up learning a lot about the races of this world. And for example, Chloe, who was a bestial, Aries he was a powerful warrior. And with this man he learned a lot about technology, monsters, and also forms of combat. He had already been traveling in the desert for several weeks, and with a smile he imagines that he was lucky to find this group. He did not know exactly what kind of people lived in this world, but he knew that those two there were good people. At night, he takes a pendant, and that same one that he had received from Sophia. He was thinking a little about that, but Aries, he appeared asking if by any chance he was not able to sleep. In response, Lewin said that it was because his mind was full of thoughts. Aries asked if he was thinking about his home. He even had curiosity about the origin of this boy. He mentions that he has many years of age and never saw anyone come from another world. Our guy, he says that the land from where he came is very similar to this one. And Aries comments that there it must be a very peaceful place. Thinking well, Lewin, he remembers how good the place where he lived was. Then he asks the man if by any chance Aries knew what baseball was, and of course the man says that he does not. After that, they went through several adventures together. While they were fleeing from a monster, he tells Chloe to run ahead of him. She turns around calling for Lewin. He was about to face the dragon head on. And while holding his bat very firmly, he strikes the creature's face. The dragon screams in pain but keeps its paws on the ground, and right after strikes the boy directly. He is thrown far away, and Chloe begins to scream, worried about Lewin. Fallen on the ground, he coughs blood. The monster did not give a second of peace and rushes again. At that moment, he thought that he was lost. However, the dragon it is split in half and the pieces end up falling. The one who had defeated the creature was precisely incinerated. Aries, this guy here farms a lot of aura, guys. The dude is fierce. Right after he asks if Luan was okay, and they go there to see if the boy had not gotten hurt. His bat was still releasing a flame, and right after it went out to devour that giant monster. This was the first time that the two were seeing that, and they were surprised. and after absorbing the monster, Luan's injuries were healed. The girl, she said that was incredible, and Ares deep inside he became very serious. He realized that not only the monster's body but also all of its mana had disappeared without leaving a trace. With that, he was sure that he could use the power of this boy, since he would be very important. Ares calls Luan and says that he would like the boy to help him on a mission, and this ends up leaving our protagonist a little surprised. Later, Chloe keeps saying that Ares was going crazy, but no guys, he was very serious. What he had asked our protagonist was that he devour the lich. The lich basically was an immortal being that no matter how many times he was defeated, he always resurrected. And since that monster was extremely powerful, Chloe was worried. However, Ares said that this would be necessary, but he would not force the boy to do that. In response, the little girl said that if he went to the lich's dungeon, Luan would be eliminated. However, he ends up saying that he will try, leaving the two surprised by that. Leaning on top of the bat, he said that he would try to devour the lich with his baseball bat. The next day they were having a hearty breakfast. Ares asks if by any chance he understands the situation of this mission. Chloe, with her mouth full, says that it will be very dangerous. And Ares even explains that Luan, he needs to gain a little more experience, because he still does not know how the powers of this world work. With his mouth dirty, he says that this is true. Because of that, before facing the lich, he would need to train a little more. It would be necessary for him to know his own limits. Thoughtful, our hero, he keeps trying to understand what he means by that. Then he imagines that maybe the bat of the bat might not be able to devour the lich, who is a much stronger being. However, the guy, he was excited and says that it would not hurt to try. Then Ares tells him to try to control the power of the bat, but he cannot. He realized that the baseball bat acted on its own, and everyone stays there asking if he will not make that monster come out from inside the staff. Chloe mentions that it is because Luan, he does not know how to use mana. What? I also have mana? The girl said yes, everyone has mana. Ares says that he will check his body. But our big boy, he looks at that as if it were nonsense. Touching his shoulder, the man says that he will only feel if he has mana or not. Thus, he begins to flow the energy through Luan's body. He closes his eyes to concentrate, and at that moment he feels a dark magic in the boy. Not even he, who was an experienced warrior, knew what that was. He was face to face with that giant bat. The power was so strong that the guy begins to feel threatened, and quickly he removes his hand from the boy's shoulder. What was that I just felt? Curious, Luan asks if by any chance he has mana or not, and even questions if Ares discovered something. A little frightened, the warrior, he says that he did not learn anything, that he did not feel anything, but it was all right, says Luan. If he had mana or not, that did not matter, because even so he had the power of the staff. But the man, he had felt mana, yes, and it was a dark mana. While Luan talked with Chloe, the man keeps saying that this boy there, he is not normal, and he was also very dangerous, even if he did not know it. Right after Luan, he keeps training with the skeleton. 3 months had already passed and he was becoming stronger and confident, and whenever he defeated a monster, the bat went there to devour. He even felt that his body was becoming much stronger. At that moment, Chloe calls him, and when turning around, the girl was offering breads for him to eat. After scraping the plate clean, he becomes very happy for having found companions so nice, and they spend a lot of time having fun. Chloe, who kept teasing him, began to be more friendly, and in the end they became great friends. And Ares is always very serious, saying that children nowadays are very silly. Right after, he asks if Luan was training the fundamentals that he had taught. With a nerd face, he asks if by any chance Master Ares was talking about the fundamentals of mana control. Honestly, he was not able to feel any energy like that in his body, and Ares imagines that it is because this power inside his body is very powerful. He even imagines that Luan might be some kind of mage or something like that. To cheer the boy up, he tells him not to be so sad, because his body was like that, full of mana, he just needed to learn how to use it. If someday he were capable of controlling mana, he would become invincible. Nor he becomes very happy, saying that his power is very strong. But Chloe knew that the guy was saying that only to make him happy, and reveals that in truth, Luan will not go into the battle against the lich. He will only enter the cave after the lich is defeated. That is because his power was still very low, and they would only use Luan's power to devour the body of the lich so that he could not resurrect. Scratching his head, he said that it was all right. Then the man stands up, saying that they should prepare themselves, because in a few days they will arrive at the cave. Giving a smile, Luan, he agrees, and thus they continue the rest of the journey. But these last days were very exhausting, and they even had to set up the camp in the open air. Early the next day, after walking a lot, Chloe complained that she was getting tired, but Ares laughed and told her to hold on, because there was little left. The guy even says that they would only need to walk a few more kilometers. With a smile, our big guy starts cheering Chloe up, and she was already starting to like him, since the guy was very kind. Thus, they pass through several beautiful landscapes. At that moment, Chloe becomes enchanted with an entrance, and Ares said that this is the tomb of the lich. Our hero becomes tense, especially because they were in front of the dungeon of one of the strongest monsters in the world. They start to go down a staircase until they finally arrive at a large hall. The boy was already getting tense, holding the lantern. Ares says that the boy should stay alert, but Luan was convinced, asking if by any chance Ares was afraid of ghosts. After mentioning the ghost, he decided to look back to see if there was nothing following them, and it seemed that the guy had a holy mouth, because as soon as he talked about a ghost appeared. He even lets out a scream, dying of fear, and then hits that ghost with the baseball bat. He starts cursing, saying that that ghost was not supposed to have scared him, and Ares comments while walking away that the power of the bat is very incredible, because it even hit a spiritual being. In the middle of the way, our protagonist asks what kind of monster this lich was, and Ares says that he is the ruler of the land of the dead. He resurrected and commanded countless undead, and at that moment a skeleton appears rushing toward them. However, Ares was very strong and defeats the monster. He also explains that no matter how many times the lich is defeated, he always resurrects every 100 years. He will resurrect precisely this year. That is why he brought Luan to devour his body. Ares imagined that if he devoured the body of the lich, he could no longer be resurrected. That was exactly why they needed the power of the baseball bat. Our hero says that he had understood and continues walking, saying that even his power will be necessary. So the question is whether the bat will want to cooperate, and if it will also be capable of devouring a monster of that level, especially because he did not know if all monsters could be devoured. Our hero was walking in front, and Ares realized that he was going toward a trap. Chloe even shouts for him to wait, and at that moment a magic circle formed behind him, but our big guy had not noticed. So Ares shouts very loudly, telling him to get out of there as fast as possible. However, guys, it was already too late. He had fallen into a magic portal, and before he realized it, he was teleported. The two realized that they had lost their main weapon, and Chloe becomes desperate, shouting for her friend. He had disappeared in an instant. Without wasting time, Ares picks Chloe up in his arms and runs. The girl even asks, "Why are you all so desperate?" And Ares was lamenting how he let his companion fall into a trap. He even imagines where he ended up. If his bet is right, he needs to run as fast as possible to save the boy. The scene changes to our protagonist, fallen on the ground. As he gets up, he keeps saying that his head hurts a lot, and he even noticed that he had created a hole in the ground. At that moment, he looks up and realizes that there was a very large door. He even imagines that maybe this is the door of the lich, the monster that they are hunting. He decides to leave his backpack behind so it does not weigh too much, and even keeps saying to himself that it is better to wait for Ares outside. Meanwhile, the badass master was defeating several skeletons. Chloe asks, "What is happening?" Then Ares explains that Luan must have stepped on a trap that took the boy directly to the lich's hall, and if he really fell in there, he will be defeated. Therefore, they should get there as fast as possible. At that moment, the boy started to get completely terrified, especially because that door gave access exactly to the hall of the lich, and the monster was not small at all, guys. Sweating cold, he said that he is screwed, but luckily it seemed that the lich was sleeping. He decides to look to the sides to see if there was any other threat, and realizes that that hall of the lich was extremely large. The boy decides to stay still, because he might end up activating another trap. His bat begins to emit blue flames, and he decides to grab the baseball bat there, asking what is happening. Because of that, Luan ended up waking him up. "Yeah, it seems that I'm screwed." The creature begins to rise, and a purple flame begins to emanate from its body. The boy was alone in that room, and the lich was also wielding a weapon. The creature was so big that it looked like a building. Meanwhile, Ares was running at maximum speed. They started to hear a noise coming from the lower floors, and the guy even mentioned that the lich must have already awakened. Back to the protagonist, we see that he had fallen to the ground from so much fear. That monster was a being of another level. At the tip of his finger, he begins to charge a spell and fires it in Luan's direction. The burst of power was so great that there was no way to dodge, so the only thing he could try to do was to deflect that spell. And that is exactly what he tries to do, guys. Using his baseball bat, he shouts very loudly, using maximum strength, and incredibly enough, he managed to deflect that power. The lich did not expect that, since the attack ended up returning exactly against him, creating an explosion. The blast of wind was intense, and when the dust settled, the lich was standing there. The boy starts calling that monster a bastard, since it was useless, because the lich had created a protective barrier. There was no way to defeat a monster of that level. And to Luan's bad luck, the lich begins to call him with his little finger. Several tentacles came out of the ground and began to grab our hero. The guy was immobilized, and meanwhile Luan stared at him, and the monster said that he had a very unusual power. Therefore, the boy should be eliminated. The monster says that the source of that power was his heart, and begins to approach. At that moment, the boy realized that he was very screwed. However, something ended up cutting the lich's hand. The boy looked to the side and realized that Ares, the badass, was there to save him. The guy's sword was releasing a black mana, and just by looking at that crazy guy there, it is already possible to see that the guy was very strong. Next, he cut all the tentacles that were holding the boy, and he fell to the ground. They even ask if he had been hurt, and then Ares tells him to hide to stay protected. With a serious look, he says that from there on he himself will take care of it. The lich ends up releasing several spells at Ares, and all of them were going in his direction. All those powers explode, and the boy starts wondering if Ares was okay. He realized that his attack was not effective, and in the middle of the smoke a blade appears. It was precisely Ares who was there, and before the lich could do anything about it, he is cut in half. At that moment, then the lich realized that he was screwed. That is because in front of him there was an extremely powerful hunter. The monster tries to regenerate and ends up doing it very quickly. However, Ares was not going to give up. The creature makes a hand sign and begins to summon a new spell. This was the strongest power of the lich, and the big guy was there trembling all over with fear. The monster says very loudly that this is the power of the stars, and ends up firing that dark spell. The big guy thinks that Ares will not escape this, and the warrior was there tanking the power. Then a big explosion happens, and the badass Ares had tanked the power excellently. He even complained, saying that the lich is stronger than he imagined. The place was all destroyed, leaving only a trail blast there that the guy had managed to protect. Next, the lich says that he will eliminate him in the next blow, and even says that this guy has always faced him alone, but this time he brought a strange boy, and he even thinks that Ares had brought this boy as a trump card to be able to eliminate him once and for all. However, the lich says that this man is not the only one who brought a present, and after joining his hands, he uses the technique called Murmur of the Void. I do not know if you noticed, but the lich says that this guy always appears there alone to fight against him, but this time he brought a boy. So I keep thinking that maybe this guy there, Ares, is more than 100 years old. The lich had made a domain expansion, and now Ares was alone together with him. The warrior comments that the mage wants to fight against him alone in that space, and the lich had done that to be able to get rid of that boy. But meanwhile, he would take a look at that boy with the bat. The monster knew that Ares brought that boy precisely to erase his existence. On the other hand, the warrior was immobilized because of that domain expansion. It must have been some mental spell that was controlling his body, and it seemed that it would not be easy at all to free himself from it. And the worst of all is that Chloe and Luan were in danger. Our protagonist also fell into that magical domain of the lich, but the big guy was even more screwed, because the dark spell of that monster was there staring at him. He was trembling all over, since the monster was approaching, saying that he would devour his flesh and his power. However, the bat appears much bigger than that spell of the lich. The monster there was terrified and even asked how that creature managed to enter inside his domain expansion. But it was over for that monster, guys. Without being able to understand anything, Ares realized that he had come out of that mental control. It seemed that the lich's spell was devoured. Ares even asks the man what it was that he did and how he dares to bring that strange boy right into his palace. Meanwhile, Ares was focused on that crystal on the monster's helmet, and knew that there was the weak point. With that, he ends up cutting the lich in half and hoped that now it would work. For Ares' luck, the bat of our protagonist was also there, and that energy begins to devour the spirit of the lich. Ares realized that it had worked, and when he looked back, he saw that our hero was feeling a lot of pain. When he opened his eyes, he asked what the hell had happened. His bat was shining very strongly, but the lich was tough to deal with, guys. And using his magic, he tries to attack the boy. Ares tries to warn what was happening, but all that energy ends up going around the big guy. He feels a very strong pain, and even falls to the ground screaming very loudly. However, the bat's magic begins to devour the last remnant of the lich. Ares realized that the boy was absorbing all that dark magic, and at that moment he stopped screaming, but a lot of smoke was coming from his body. The man runs over, asking if the boy was okay. That was a reaction from having absorbed that dark energy of the lich. At that moment, Ares realized that someone had entered there. He immediately looks to the side, and just by the guy's face, it is already possible to know that he knows this person. It was a woman who was there. Later, our big guy ends up waking up and took a huge scare. But when he realizes he was alone, where is everyone? He calls for Ares and Chloe. However, he ends up noticing a backpack together with a piece of paper. It was a message from Ares saying that something urgent had happened, and he had to leave, and thanks to the help of our hero, they defeated the lich. He keeps thinking why he was abandoned. The scene then returns a few minutes earlier when Ares had met that woman. She was a very elegant woman with red hair. She says that the Imperial Majesty had summoned him, but the warrior was surprised, because this was sudden. With a smile, she says that this is never news, and that the Majesty does not need permission to summon him. The guy gets a little angry, and using magic she opens a portal and says that since he finished the mission, he needs to return immediately. The guy looks back seeing our protagonist. Chloe starts screaming, asking if Luan was okay. And when she saw that woman, she became paralyzed. She knew that woman very well, and just by looking at her face, it is already possible to see that she is not a good thing. Chloe calls for Luan and even runs to see if he was alive. But Ares tells the girl to stay calm because he was fine. He was only unconscious because he had absorbed the energy of the lich. The elegant woman was there waiting for the guy. Ares mentions that there is something that was bothering him, but he ends up leaving it aside and calls Chloe. He tells the girl to separate a backpack with food and a map, and also a small compass so that he would not get lost. The woman realizes that that boy had a sinister power, and she had heard Ares say that the boy absorbed the lich. Because of that, she starts laughing and thinks that this story is very interesting. At that moment, Ares tells her to go already, and even tells her to take her eyes off that boy. He was going toward the portal, and they end up passing by her in a serious manner. He tells the woman that he had a warning. It was better for her to lose interest in that boy. That is if she wanted to have a long life. Chloe keeps looking back, feeling sorry to leave our big guy alone, and it seems that this woman had really become interested in him. And the poor Luan was abandoned while the woman says that she will keep in mind the powers of that boy. Thus they go away and the portal closes by itself. He keeps saying that they were very mean. He even thought that they were friends and started shouting, saying that maybe he was the only one who saw the two as if they were family members. But he could not stay locked in that dungeon forever, and he even imagines that maybe they had good reasons to leave him there. Now that he had managed to help in the defeat of the lich, he would need to take the map and get out of that place. But this absorption power of his was very strange. Looking to the sides, he realized that there were no monsters and makes a greedy face, saying that maybe he should look for some treasures. Maybe he could find something valuable that would be worth it. He had managed to find a cursed elf skull orb and also a legendary staff of pain and despair. There were several items that had been dropped, but none of them there served him. Finally, he ends up leaving that dungeon and goes outside to look for a nearby city. He had never used a map and a compass in practice, so it was kind of confusing. I bet that most of us here would not be able to use it. He makes a thinking face, wondering if there really is a city nearby, and even becomes sad, saying that now he returned to a journey alone. During his adventure, he ends up encountering other monsters along the way. 3 months had already passed since he was alone wandering in the desert. Without the knowledge that he had acquired from Chloe and Ares, he would not be able to survive, and after walking a lot, he finally arrived at a forest. Finally, I left that desert behind. It had been a long time since he had seen any plant, and he begins to feel a pleasant smell of the flowers. However, he ends up hearing the sound of an explosion. Yeah, it seems that I really do not have a second of peace. The scene shows a boy running away. He was desperate. That is because there was a weaver, which is a winged dragon, and that monster ends up hitting close to the boy. He is thrown far away, and at that moment he thought that he would be dead, since the dragon had surrounded him. Someone please help me. His knight, who was Mr. Robert, had already been sent to the afterlife. The guy's mission was to annihilate some goblins, but in the middle of the path he encounters a dragon. The creature opens its mouth and begins to roar, and the creature's breath was so strong that he almost died just because of it. Next, his companion appears to save him. He becomes surprised and she makes a little joke asking if he was afraid. Next, she tells him to get up and help the companions, and he gets angry, saying that she should have run away while he distracted the dragon. But she says that she will not leave her companion there alone, fighting against a monster. He says the name Alyosha and ends up holding back his tears. He would need to act like a true leader. Putting his hand on the sword, he asks if she had any plan, and she says that if by any chance she had one, Robert would not be dead. The only thing they would do was fight until the end. Motivated, he says that everything is fine, and at that instant the monster prepares to swing its tail at the girl, and that blow hits, throwing her far away. At that moment he realized how scary it was to fight against a dragon. Alyosha had suffered a serious attack, and behind him 2 arrows are fired and end up hitting the dragon. He realized that it was Cullis who did that, and the girl was trembling all over with fear. However, she says that she could not run away alone, and that if it was to die, she would die together with them. But the leader of the group keeps shouting, saying that she should have run away and not come back. In this way, the dragon ends up ignoring him, going toward the girl. She realized that she would be killed by the dragon, and in a final sigh, she asks for someone to appear to save her. But she knew that this was impossible, and the impossible happens, guys, with our hero arriving and giving a strong hit on the dragon's head. The attack was strong, leaving everyone surprised, and the big guy was there holding the baseball bat, farming aura. Minutes later, they were thanking him for saving their lives. The dragon really had been sent to the afterlife, and a little embarrassed, he stays there saying that he did nothing incredible. What do you mean, man? Nothing incredible? The blonde guy grabs the hand of our protagonist and keeps saying that Luan is his savior. Next, he says that they need to get out of there and take Alyosha away because she is very injured. He even says that knocking down a dragon with a single blow is a very difficult feat. And he even asks if by any chance our hero was a high-class hunter, and even imagines that he is of a very high level. Are you by any chance a platinum-level hunter? But the big guy stays without saying anything, making the guys there curious. Then he says that he does not know what that means, leaving everyone surprised. What? How do you not know what a hunter is? Ah, should I know? The leader of the group ends up picking up his companion, placing her on his back, and our hero tells him that he came from another world. Scratching his cheek, he says that he understands that this is a little difficult to believe. But the leader mentions that he believes in Luan, since he had saved his life. Celis becomes very curious, asking if by any chance he was teleported. They knew that teleportation spells existed, but not teleportation to another dimension, right? At that moment he realized that his case is very unusual. The leader says that what he had just done there had shocked them. That is because they saw the protagonist using his baseball bat to devour the dragon, and they even mentioned that his bat had started shining. And with an excited face, the leader keeps saying that Luan's power was really incredible. Thus, they begin the journey to return to the city. The people keep asking if in his world people have powers, and so as not to have to tell a very long story, he ends up lying, saying that yes. At that moment, they end up arriving at the village, and the leader becomes happy, because it will be possible to do the treatment there on his companion. This was the easternmost territory of the kingdom of Lemia. Upon seeing that, Luan's eyes fill with tears. The blonde guy asks if by any chance he did not like the city, but that was not it. Luan keeps saying. He ends up clearing his throat and says that he got emotional because it had been a long time since he had seen many people. After going to a restaurant, he begins to eat fried chicken and also drinks a cold beer. The guy was very excited, saying that it had been a long time since he had eaten something so delicious. He did not imagine that the first time he drank something after becoming an adult would be in another world. The leader of the group was called Al, and he together with C's had taken the girl to take care of her injuries. He said that Alyosha had suffered very serious damage to her arm and he would take her to a hospital, and later he would recover Robert's body there in the forest. Luan says that he is very sorry for not arriving in time to save the other companion, but Al says that it is fine and next gives a bag of coins so that he could spend the day until they met at the inn at night. He realized that that money there was not much, but it was enough. At that moment, he realized that he was in a new world, and of course all of us would like to have an experience like this in a different world, but not a traumatizing experience like his, right? Looking ahead, he realizes that the hall was very busy. there were several races such as beast folk, dwarves, elves, and humans, but it had been a long time since he had slept in a comfortable bed, and the next day when he woke up he was exhausted. He fell asleep very quickly, and it seems that he slept more than he should have. At that moment, he hears someone knocking on the door and goes there to answer. He realizes that it was precisely Salis, the beast girl. She had recovered, and the other one with purple hair. She was very cute, thanking him. She also tells him to go down there to meet Alt, and so our protagonist ends up going down the stairs. When he arrives there, the boy keeps saying for them to sit together. The leader of the group was quite friendly and had said that our protagonist could eat as much as he wanted. Alonlight wanted to thank him personally, but she was embarrassed. And Alt even says that they would like to thank him in a proper way for what he did yesterday. Giving a smile, Lon says that it is all right. Then the guy introduces himself, saying that his name is Alt, and that he was a copper rank hunter from the group wandering together. The beast woman was called Alyosha, and the human who was part of the rear guard, she was Celis. Curious, Lon asks, what is that thing about hunters and ranks? Then she asks, how do you not know that? And he even gets a little embarrassed. But Alt says that it was very rude of him to act that way, since our protagonist came from another world, so he did not know. He explains that hunters were people who hunted wild monsters, or even other types of animals that threaten the villages, and the rankings went from the lowest, such as steel, then copper, silver, gold and platinum, and lastly mithril. The weakest groups had to hunt the weakest monsters. And as the ranking of the group kept getting higher, you started hunting more powerful monsters, and that usually brought a lot of status, since when you rose in rank, you gained a lot of fame. They said that platinum-level hunters only existed 20 in the entire world. As for the mithril level, there had only been 10 in all of history, and they say that only 3 of them are still alive. The boy realized that this really seems to be something important in this world. These insignias were so important that they were even sold on the black market. Of course, pretending to be a hunter of a rank that is not yours is a crime, but even so, people still did it. Luen says that he understood, but it was a lot of information for him to process. Alt says that he will change the subject and says that he was thinking about inviting Luen to join the group, and even asks if he would like to be part of it. That ends up leaving our protagonist surprised. Alt says that he is not trying to pressure him or anything like that, but since he needs money and will also need status, he should join some group. Thinking about that, Luen says that if he wants to return home, he will have to adapt to this world. The fox girl says that he is very strong, since he had defeated the dragon with only one blow, but some people who were nearby hear that and say that it is a lie. A girl hits the table with her hand, saying that it is impossible to defeat a dragon with only one blow, and says that all of them there are liars. Our hero realizes that this type of person was unbearable. Alyosha tells Maria to get out of there, because she was very annoying, and the girl keeps mocking that animal, saying that it should not eat together with humans, and that ends up leaving Alyosha extremely furious, and Alt needs to intervene to separate the fight. That girl kept mocking our protagonist, saying that he did not have enough strength to hunt a dragon, and she even asks if by any chance he brought some part of the monster to prove that he had really defeated it. Alt said that no. That is because our protagonist devoured the monster and the girl without knowing that starts laughing, saying that they are liars and even threatens Alt, saying that low-level hunters cannot even hunt goblins properly. Because of the provocations, Luen began to get irritated, and the girl said that she does not talk with commoners, and she even says that a noble like her cannot be touched by simple slaves. Wait a minute, you called me what? Hey shorty? The blonde gets angry, saying that she is not short. Oh no, you are not short, you are only 1.42. At that moment, a redhead appears to separate the fight between the two. The big guy asks who that guy is and realizes that this redhead seemed very calm. Maria tells Brian to stop interrupting her conversation, and the redhead apologizes to his lady and says that he will have to interrupt because he does not want a general fight, and even tries to calm his lady. However, our protagonist touches his shoulder, saying, "Who does this guy think he is to interfere in your discussions?" At that moment, Brian becomes serious. "Let's stop this childish fight right now, okay? Okay." Luen realized that this redhead was very serious and even laughed. "Are you by any chance working together to annoy me?" Thus, the atmosphere begins to become tense. Luen begins to stare at Brian. Then someone short appears, saying to leave that aside. It was a dwarf, and she was telling Brian to stop being childish and picking fights. And she also says that Maria was wrong, because she was the one who started the provocations. She turns to Luen and apologizes. She says that everyone there found it strange, because this story of defeating a dragon with a single blow seemed to be very exaggerated. That one was a dwarf, guys, and her name was Erin. Luen realizes that the smallest one there was the one who seemed to be the most mature. He looks at his new companions and they seem to be very calm. Then he says that it is fine and that he hopes not to meet them again in a situation like this. Erin thanks him for the understanding and thus they decide to stop this fight. After returning to the table, Celis starts laughing, saying that he took those provocations very seriously. Then he asks his companions what he needs to do to become a hunter. He wanted to enter the guild and participate together with them. After making the registration, he ends up receiving a steel emblem. He remembers that his friend said that it was enough to pay a registration fee, and he did not know that it would cost so much. Hours earlier, his friend said that it would not cost much money, and maybe the amount of money that he gave the day before would be enough. He saw that there was only one coin left, and that was a gold coin. Alt said that this coin is worth 1,000 crowns, and explained that the black coin is worth 1 crown. The copper one is worth 10 crowns, the silver one 100, and the gold one 100. Because of that, he became very happy. thinking that he was rich. However, he ended up spending half to register in the Hunters Guild. Yeah, my son, it seems that this world there will be very difficult. Now that he had already registered in the guild, all tells them to leave. What already? The blonde says that they need to prepare for the next mission, because it will be a little difficult. The mission will start in 3 days, so they should prepare. What, only in 3 days? It is very little time. Yeah, my son, you can go there and try to buy some equipment. They were staying at the inn that was managed by the Hunters Guild. Most of the guests there were also hunters. That is why they always encountered Maria. And there it was also possible to accept mission requests. Then Alt explained that Lewin could take some missions to manage to gather some money and buy equipment. And giving a smile, our protagonist said that he will do exactly that. Thus they end up saying goodbye. He would now need to take some missions, and even becomes a little tense thinking that it will be very difficult to earn money. He had already spent 500 crowns on that insignia. He starts making calculations in his mind of how much he would need to earn per day to stay alive, and he saw that the room and also the food are very expensive. It seems that he will have to work a lot, and he even started crying, saying that he is not prepared for this. Next, he ends up going to a shop and bought a very cool armor, but he did not have enough money, so the armor had to be leather. Next, he asked the price and the seller says that it was 230 crowns. He pays and becomes a little grumpy, saying that metal armors must be much more expensive. When he arrives outside, he becomes a little lost and even asks himself what he should do now. Since he was running out of money, he should already start taking some missions. Thus, he goes to the Hunters Guild and hits his hand on the table with a poster saying that he would like to take that mission, and even tries to flirt with the attendant so that she would accept giving that mission to him. However, the woman said that he was steel level and could only take beginner missions. Since he had no choice, he ended up accepting, and there was the boy carrying sacks of flour. Next, he had to clean a barn and finally wash clothes. That was humiliating because he was much stronger than most hunters. At night, he ends up returning home very tired. He had done manual labor throughout the whole day, and as payment he earned only 30 crowns. That was very difficult because just the food of the day cost 25. He saw one of the merchants advertising a delicious food. He went there and kept looking at the skewers. His mouth was salivating from so much hunger, and for only 3 crowns he bought those mysterious skewers. When tasting it, he realizes that it was delicious, but someone ends up appearing behind him. A hand is extended and a girl was following the path of a compass. She realized that she had found who she was looking for. It was our protagonist who was there innocently eating the skewers. The girl approaches and pulls his clothes. She even says that she had found him, and when he turned, he saw that it was a beautiful red-haired elf, and she said that he was the person who had his destiny linked. The guy does not understand anything, and after going to a tavern, she keeps saying that he was the destined hero. In a serious way, he asks if she has any proof of that. And as an answer, she says that it is a prophecy from her master, and even says that she had received this compass that would lead her to the hero. Our big guy says that he cannot simply believe a story like that, but according to the girl, her master never made mistakes in prophecies. And she even says that her master was called Drenus, the prophetic witch. What? It seems to be the name of a very famous witch. The girl says that her master never made mistakes in prophecies, and she even gave an example of a day when her master said that it would rain. But our big guy says that this does not seem to be a prophecy, since the day should have been cloudy, and of course the girl became furious. Alright, you are saying that I am the destined hero, but destined for what? The girl says that her master mentioned that she should help the destined hero, no matter what he was going to do. Alright, but who said that you know what I am trying to do, girl? She mentioned that obviously he is trying to save the world, but he says that he is not. His objective is to return to his original world. What? Return to your original world? I do not know who you are, who this master of yours is, and much less what hero is this that you are talking about. My intention here is not to save this world, but rather to return home as soon as possible. So I wish you luck so that you can find the person that you are looking for. And he leaves saying that he is not that person, leaving the girl alone. From above, Maria sees that whole scene and even mocks it, imagining that he had been rejected by that girl. Brian tells his lady not to keep caring and interfering in the lives of others, but Maria says that Brian does not understand how fun it is to mock the poor. He who was the leader of the group had to keep doing the heavy work, dealing with the papers, and she becomes very angry, saying that this is what he is for. Nobles like her should not worry about this kind of thing, but when Brian looks down there, he realizes that that was a disciple of Drenus, and just by looking at the girl he already finds her interesting, because he imagines that she is powerful. The girl has a flashback remembering her master handing that compass to her. The master said that that was a magical tool that would guide her to her destiny, and even tells Ariel to leave quickly. Thus the girl ended up saying goodbye to her master. The scene returns to our protagonist doing heavy work. He was very tired and an old lady thanks him for carrying those heavy sacks. He says that he did nothing special, only his job. And meanwhile the girl was there watching him from afar. The old lady liked the work so much that she even gave a tip. And of course he became happy thanking Ariel. She becomes worried thinking if Lewin is really the hero of destiny, and even becomes tense thinking about what she will do now. At that moment he asked if she was going to stay there snooping on him all day, and even says that he noticed that she was following him. He also says that it would be better for her to return to her master, because he was not the hero of destiny that she talked about so much. Then the girl reveals that her master had died. The big guy realized that he said words that were kind of harsh to her, so he apologized, saying that he did not want to offend her. The girl stood up and asked if his desire was to return to his original world. If that really was his desire, she would help him. If he really wanted to clean barns, he should clean barns. But if he wanted to return home, she would help him. That is because her master said that she should help him with whatever was necessary. The scene goes to the Hunters Guild. Alt was fixing his armor, and while he was doing that, someone ends up calling him. Celis mentions that Lewin is also at the inn, but it was strange because they did not see him during the whole day. Someone ends up saying out loud that he had run away out of fear. Who is there was Maria, and she kept saying that that boy was a liar and that he had not defeated the dragon, as everyone there was saying. Alt asked why she is provoking them right now, and Maria continues with the provocations, asking if they do not know. There had been reports of monsters that were appearing around that village. Because of that, her group, the Noble Oppressors, graciously accepted this task. They would eliminate all those monsters from the region. And they also accepted the mission of supervising and protecting the novice hunters who would participate in that hunt. Alt says that he even accepts participating in the mission together with them, but he will not tolerate these provocations. Veronica, who is a member of their group, asks who this Lewin they were mentioning is. Celis shouts very loudly, saying that Lewin saved their lives by defeating a dragon, but Maria starts laughing, saying that this is ridiculous, because he seemed to be very weak, and she even mentions that he was flirting with an elf, leaving the girl there very embarrassed. The blonde said that a mage appeared and kept saying that he was a hero of destiny or something like that, and then she saw that they were in a complete romance, and he must have even abandoned his group to live a life with that girl. However, Celis appears there saying that this little girl was a liar. We see that the girl became very jealous, and even Maria became scared. She says that Lewin would never abandon his group without giving an explanation, and even asks who that girl was who appeared behind him. At that moment, Lewin ends up arriving there. Everyone turns to see the boy, and there was our dear Lewin with Ariel behind him. That was the red-haired mage that Maria had been talking about. He even gives a hello to the people. Alt asks where he had been, and our protagonist apologizes for being late. The mission was about to start, and Maria, she was a little disappointed because she had ended up telling a lie. She even points her finger at Lewin, saying that he was a traitor. Traitor, why I did nothing. She says that he is a traitor because he had formed a group with that mage and abandoned his companions, and says that this is considered a betrayal. Alt says that he is not forcing his friend to do anything. If he wants to form a group with another person, it was all fine. And we see that Celis, she was there with a lot of jealousy. The mage ends up sitting with them, and Alt asks how they met. Scratching his head, Lewin says that this is a long story, but Ariel says that she had searched for him, and says that destiny had guided her to Lewin, and this only makes the situation worse, making everyone look at the two as if they were a couple, and of course Celis became even more jealous. Everyone started a discussion, and Brian started joking, saying that there was a romantic atmosphere in the air. To try to break the ice a little, Alt asks what the girl's name is. She says that her name is Ariel, and very excited, Alt asks if she would also like to participate in this monster hunting mission. She says yes, because she is interested in helping Lewin, and everything that he asks she will do. Vera, together with Brian, keeps saying that love is beautiful. Alyosha, she had serious damage in her arm, so she could not participate in this mission, so it would be good to have one more member. Lewin apologizes for bringing this girl without informing the leader of the group, but the blonde says that it is fine, and that they should already prepare to leave. He says that their part in the mission would be to hunt goblins, which were weaker creatures. These monsters basically acted on impulse and usually attacked villages. In the middle of the forest, they say that lately in the village where they were, many goblins had appeared. He even says that in the previous week they were hunting those goblins, but they ended up being attacked by a dragon. Noor even understood their mission, but asks why that other group was coming right behind them. Alt explains that there are other more powerful monsters, so a stronger group was placed to watch over them. Maria keeps saying that he should consider it as an honor. After all, a noble like her was protecting a nobody who was of the steel ranking. Alt tells Lewin not to take that girl's provocations into consideration, and that although Maria was very annoying, she was very strong, and their group, even though it was new, had already reached the silver rank, almost rising to the gold rank. What about this little tiny girl there? Very curious, Maria asks where that mage came from. And everything that the blonde did left Lewin irritated, saying that she was very annoying. Alt says that they should worry about the mission and leave that aside. He even says that since Lewin has blunt weapons, he should go in front. Celis and Ariel would take care of the rear. By the way, he asks what type of magic Ariel usually used. The girl seems not to understand that type of question. What? My question was very vague. It is because he had heard that there are several types of magic, and some mages end up specializing in specific types. There were mages who made potions, and there were mages who made summons, and there were also necromancers. He even gave the example of Miss Veronica, who was a specialist in enhancement magic, and served as if she were a support. Since he had never worked with a mage before, maybe he had asked a stupid question. But the girl says that he did not ask a stupid question. At that moment, an arrow goes toward the girl and ends up stopping at the last second because our protagonist ended up catching it in the air. Alt found this very strange, and Celis became surprised looking up. They were goblins who had caught them by surprise. Our protagonist had a very serious face, and Brian found this strange because it was a goblin ambush. He was going to try to help, but Maria extended her hand, telling him not to go. It was to let that group of weaklings fight alone. It was to see what they were capable of. A very ugly goblin ends up charging at them, but our protagonist ends up hitting him with his staff. So far it was being very easy, thinks Lewin, and right after that he ends up hearing a noise. He saw that they were other goblins that had been defeated. All of this thanks to 2 arrows that were launched by his companion Celis, and Alt had also defeated other monsters. He did not expect that his companions would act so quickly, and even says that he is impressed with their work. Celis says that it was very strange for them to make an ambush, since they always acted in a disorganized way. They were also smart and always attacked the weakest, always children or elderly first. But instead of doing that, Alt says that the goblins tried to hit an arrow at Ariel, and when he looks back he realizes that the other group was very calm, only watching them. Lewin says that they should have kept one of the goblins alive to be able to ask questions. At that moment everyone was shocked. Even Ariel was shocked while he kept saying that they should use a goblin to ask questions to find the nest. Even Maria, who was very arrogant, had her eyes wide open. That was because behind our protagonist there was a monster, and it was not just any monster, it was a giant troll. Alt shouts telling Lewin to run away from there, and our big guy looks back and realizes that the monster was already preparing to hit him. At that instant Maria attacks, defending our hero. This little girl here was badass, guys. The two become surprised because she had intervened to save him. He even asks if Maria was fine. And right after that Brian touched his shoulder, telling the boy to move away, because from now on they would take care of it. Lewin stays quiet without saying anything. That was a Rocky Mountain troll and it lived near the demonic domains. It was strange, it was in that region, but Brian's group would face it. Maria says for no one to lower their guard. That was an opponent that would not fall easily. Lewin says that they should also help in the battle, but Alt says that it was better not to. If they interfered, they would only get in the way. He knew that Lewin was strong, but the noble oppressors were also an experienced group that acted in total coordination. For that reason, Alt keeps saying that they should trust them. Our protagonist agrees, and when he looks at Ariel, she was also there watching everything. Brian tells Veronica to prepare, and so she begins to perform a spell. That was the increase of battle spirit. She had buffed all the members of her group. Alt found this interesting, because she managed to buff everyone. Right after that, the monster ended up making a jump and charged at Maria, and the girl faced him firmly and managed to block with her shield. It was very difficult and she felt the pressure of that blow. The monster was in front of them and the dwarf prepared to fire a shot. Together with Ain's arrow, Brian also charged forward. The arrow ended up hitting the eye and that was the perfect opening. Maria told Brian to prepare and so he ended up jumping on top of her shield. They fought together and now Brian was face to face with the troll. Thus he managed to strike his dagger, making the monster lose the vision of both eyes. Lewin was surprised because that team coordination was incredible. Each member moves as part of a single body. That was a real team that had trained to make several formations. Brian ends up landing on the ground. Now that its vision was blocked, they should take advantage of that opening. The regeneration of a troll was very fast, so they would need to act quickly. Maria says that they need to aim first at the heart of that monster, so that they could stop the regeneration. That was the group Noble Oppressors. They were known as a complete group with clean coordination and solid positioning, but they had a flaw. They did not have great attack power. For example, the dwarf only had a crossbow, and Brian only has daggers with short blades. Veronica was the only mage in the group, but she was a support mage, without offensive powers. And Maria, who was the vanguard, her weapon was a spear that worked better on top of a horse. When the spear was positioned on top of an equine, she would be able to use much better its offensive power. So, to compensate for that lack of offensive power, they had a secret tactic. Veronica was using the increase of strength and also the increase of speed and the increase of resistance, and finally the increase of weapon. All of that so that Maria would be buffed and prepare to strike the troll. Thus she ends up charging like a lightning bolt. Celis and Ariel keep watching everything. Because of that coordination, they ended up becoming known as the Guild of the Golden Unicorn. At that moment, the troll realized that it would be hit, and without having anything to do, it ended up receiving the full blow. The little girl gives a smile, and the two boys become impressed. She had passed through the monster. Giving a laugh, she said that a giant troll was nothing to her. However, she received the side effects of those strength increases, and with that she ended up spitting blood. Alt became worried about Maria, and Brian ran to help his lady. He had warned that this method required a lot of pressure on the body, but she said that a noble like her should set the example for the others. Now that the situation was critical, they should return and ask for reinforcements, but she ended up being hit. Brian saw her being hit right in front of him, and an arrow ended up striking her body. It seemed that the arrow was poisoned and quickly she began to lose her strength. In front of them there was a dense forest full of monsters. Several goblins and giant trolls came out from inside, and Brian realized that this mission was of a much higher level than theirs. They were completely surrounded. Alt saw that they really should have asked for reinforcements, and at that moment Maria shouts Veronica's name. The support mage asks Maria what she wanted. Then the blonde says for her to take everyone and leave there as fast as possible, because she would buy time so they could get out alive. Erin does not agree with that. And even Brian keeps telling his lady that she should not choose that path. She says that she knows very well what Brian is about to say, and holding her spear she tells him not to be stubborn. It was the duty of a noble to place themselves in front as a sacrifice for others. Brian realizes that the situation was critical and his lady would not change her mind. At that moment our protagonist appears saying that she is making too much drama, and even says that there is a limit to how much she can despise people. And holding the baseball bat he asks if she really thought they would run away. They look back frightened, and meanwhile Ariel continued watching everything without saying anything. And I bet that at that moment Celis became even more in love. The blonde tells the boy to stop being stubborn and even says that he will not hurt anyone with that trash weapon. That was because they were dealing with giant trolls. But our big guy says that when he fought together with Ares, they faced monsters much more powerful. And of course the girl does not believe that, telling him to stop telling lies. At that moment a troll appears behind her, ready to attack her. She screams in desperation, but our protagonist goes there to save her, and just by striking with his staff, that monster ends up being obliterated. They could not believe that the boy was that strong, and the monster was there desperate, screaming in pain. He says that he knows very well that she is a veteran hunter, and even asks what her plan is, and even says that everyone was waiting for her signal. Alt says that he will not abandon Maria, and all his companions say that they will fight until the end no matter the cost. At that moment she realized that she had true friends by her side, and even gives a smile. With that she ends up coming up with a strategy, saying that Brian and Celis should eliminate the goblins first, and the other trolls would be handled by the rest of the group. She realized that Lewin had very strong damage with that staff, and tells him to go to the front. However, Ariel approaches and says that she alone will take care of all of this. The group asks if she has some plan, and giving a small laugh she says yes. She even remembers that Alt had asked her earlier what her special type of magic was, and she tells everyone that she did not answer because she did not have a specific magic. That was because there is no magic in this world that she cannot use. At that moment she ends up using a mana increase, and thus Veronica ends up having her mana restored. Right after that she uses the elemental increase. A burst of fire begins to appear around her staff. Those were the ascending dragon flames. A gigantic fire ends up falling from the sky, and with that she sweeps away all those monsters. She was much stronger than they imagined, and our hero stays there watching everything. Wow, my girl, you even destroyed the forest. She was there farming aura and suddenly turned back. With a cute smile she says that everything was solved, and right after that steps on the ground. Maria was not even able to speak properly because of the poisoning, and with that she ended up falling heavily to the ground. Brian immediately became worried and started shouting Maria's name. That was a deadly poison, and they managed to take the girl to the nearby village. They had managed to remove the arrows, and Brian was very worried, saying that everything that could be done had already been done. The doctor says that she must stay at rest, and Lewin says that he hopes Maria gets well. Ariel was a little worried. Then they ask Erin why she is not being treated in a mansion, since she keeps saying that she is a noble. Then Aram says that Maria is no longer a noble. The boy immediately asks, right, what do you mean? What happened? He even mentions that he heard all of them calling Maria my lady. Then Erin explains that actually Maria was born noble, and Brian was her main companion, but all of that stayed in the past. Thus, the scene ends up returning with Brian still a teenager. He had been captured by some knights and was being transported to another place together with several other bandits. One of the guys ends up noticing that there was a boy inside and asks why the boy keeps that grumpy face, but Brian does not answer anything. Unconcerned, the bandit says that it is all right. He keeps that grumpy face because he is going to be killed anyway. The knights end up stopping in a place and even comment that carrying so much weight inside that wagon would be a waste of resources. One of them even comments that those bandits there are petty thieves, and at that moment one of the soldiers is hit. The man starts screaming in pain, and Brian realized that they were suffering an ambush. It was the new army that had arrived there, and they started hitting all the soldiers with arrows. The commander was seeing that from above, and when they arrived, all the soldiers had already been defeated. One of the knights calls the Lord and asks what they should do with those 3 prisoners. The commander says that since they are criminals, they should execute them right now. And the men were there dying of fear, but Brian was not. He was standing still. The commander approaches and observes the face of that boy. After taking off the helmet, the man asks, "What are your crimes?" A man begins to shout, saying that they only search bodies on a battlefield. And when he finishes speaking, the commander cuts off his head. It seems that this old man there did not have much patience. The other bandit becomes terrified, but Brian continues without any emotion. The commander even says that it seems that this red-haired boy has lost the will to live, and questions if he lost his attachment to life. Since Brian did not answer, the blonde there asked what his crime was. At that moment, Brian simply looks up and says that since he will be killed, that man should cut off his head quickly, or maybe he was too afraid to kill a child without any reason. The commander starts laughing at that boy and says that he liked him, since the kid was very bold. Putting away the sword, he says that he will take that boy to keep company for his youngest daughter, and even orders his men to put him inside the carriage. The commander's son says that he understood, and ends up placing Brian as if he were a slave inside the house itself. Upon arriving there, they give him a bathtub full of hot water to take a bath. It seemed that the guy did not have any hygienic habits, and when he leaves the bathroom, one of the maids says that he was stinking. Take a proper bath and remove those stinking clothes. Thus he returned to the bath and even kept thinking, what kind of slave is this, that they give a bath and clean clothes. Right after that, one of the soldiers says that he should not act disrespectfully with the young miss, and even mentions that if he does anything funny, he will die. The guy was very bored, and at that moment Maria started coming down the stairs. She was still a little child, and was happy with the present that her father had given her. When she gets close, she mentions that his appearance is very sloppy and that he should act in a more refined way. It had only been 5 seconds since he had seen that girl and he was already finding her annoying, but she started acting kindly toward him, saying that she will treat him well. Some days passed and he was always around the girl. However, she did not like his original name, since he was called Jared. Because of that, she keeps saying that she should choose for him a name that sounded more intelligent. After thinking a lot, she ends up deciding and says that from now on he will be called Brian. The boy thought that name was very ridiculous, but it was the name that his lady had chosen. At that moment, she extends her hand and says that she will count on him for whatever she needs. He thought that was very strange. A young lady is extending her hands to a mere slave. However, the years kept passing and he was adapting to the mansion. Instead of stealing or robbing the streets, he was now doing domestic work. He even started making friends with the employees of the mansion. Besides that, he had delicious food every day. Instead of people holding resentment against him, people were approaching and even he could say that he had friends inside the mansion, such as that girl. It seemed that in a few months he returned to the desire to live. While helping the maid outside, she asked if he was fine. With his head down, he says that he has nothing to complain about, and the girl stayed silent observing him, and right after that she placed her hand on his forehead, and even said that she knew that, saying that he looks better when his forehead was exposed. And the guy became very embarrassed. He says that he does not care about haircuts. He says that he does not care, but he became very embarrassed with flushed cheeks. At that moment, someone calls for Brian, and when going up the stairs he asks what his lady wanted. Maria was sulking and says that she would like to eat sweets. However, the girl's mother said that she could not eat them. And it was exactly because of that that she was asking him to get them. And she even makes a sulking face, and because of that she ended up convincing him. After going down to the kitchen, he brought her some sweets and she stayed eating those sweets with a very cute face. She even says that she knew that he was the right boy for that role. Since he was a bandit, he had stealing skills, but the guy seems that he does not like touching on those subjects very much. Some years passed and one day he realized that Maria had grown older and had even become a very beautiful and kind girl. He mentions that her father was already arriving and at that moment the head of the family had returned. His wife welcomed him. He had spent a few months in a military campaign. At that moment the girl runs out calling for her father and runs toward him. Finally they end up giving a very affectionate hug, and the man could not take his eyes off Brian, who always acted respectfully in front of him. The girl's brothers also appear and she becomes very happy. That is because it had been quite some time since she had seen her 2 older brothers. This was Leon, who was the oldest brother, and the second son was called Reynold. They stay there playing with their little sister, and one of them even comments to Brian saying that he thanks him for taking care of his sister. He felt very grateful for everything that Brian did. Of course, these compliments left the boy a little surprised. Right after that, the father says that everyone should gather to have lunch as a family, and there were all the members eating delicious foods. The girl was very happy to stay there seeing her father and her brothers, and so they had a very comforting dinner, and just by seeing that happy family, Brian already felt happy. Later he was collecting the plates and his lord had called him. The master of the family said that he would like to have an important conversation, and Brian went there to talk with him. They sat outside and the man said that it had already been 5 years since he brought Brian to his house. He even asks how the boy is feeling, and he says very happily that he could not ask for anything more. He says that he was living well, and the man laughs saying that it is possible to see just by looking at his face. That is because when he took him 5 years ago, he had no will to live, and Brian says that all of this is thanks to the Lord. He had brought back in him the will to have a life. The man looks at that carefully and says that now Brian's life belongs to him, and even asks if he would be willing to spend that life for him. What do you mean spend my life for the Lord? Very close to the mansion, a horse approaches and we see that an army was approaching that man's mansion. It seemed that they were prepared to attack, and the old man with a mustache gives the order to advance. Thus they march toward Maria's mansion. Brian suddenly bursts into the mansion at full speed. Maria has just woken up and immediately asks what is going on. Completely panicked, Brian keeps insisting that his lady must leave the place right away. A bit shaken, she asks again what the hell is happening. At the same time outside, her father is standing face to face with a general. The man sitting atop the horse is called Jeffrey. He holds the position of president of the Central Association of Nobles in the Human Kingdom. Meanwhile, Maria's brother is also already aware that the mansion is under attack. The boy's father grabs his sword and even remarks that he never expected Jeffrey to become a lapdog of the Empire. That comment sets the man off and he snaps back saying everything he does is out of loyalty to the kingdom, which is why he has come to wipe out their household. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Brian is trying to escape together with Maria. He grabs the girl firmly by the wrist and starts running in desperation. She keeps asking what is going on, but he says there is no time to explain. His only priority is to make sure she gets out of there alive. A few minutes earlier, he had been speaking with his master, and Maria's father warned him that a massacre would soon unfold in that place, and when the time came, he would entrust his daughter to Brian. Hearing that, the boy is left completely stunned. He even asks his master what will happen to him. In other words, he must fulfill his duty, and that duty is to fight until the very end, without taking a single step back, together with his son and the rest of his soldiers. He then asks Jeffrey if that small army is all he brought. However, the general calmly replies that it is not. He came fully prepared. Yeah, that is never a good sign. At that moment, the head of the family is taken aback. especially since Jeffrey's forces include one of the 12 zodiac signs. The man grows furious, demanding to know if Jeffrey has lost his mind, bringing an enemy into the imperial capital. After a few minutes, the entire mansion is already engulfed in flames. The servants begin running in sheer panic, and the maids have all been slaughtered. Meanwhile, Brian continues fleeing with his lady. Seeing such devastation, the girl is left in shock. However, Brian grips her shoulder tightly and tells her there is no time for this, and that she needs to pull herself together. Dazed and unable to fully grasp what is happening, she admits she is sad, terrified, but what matters most is getting out alive. He opens the stable, since the horses are already prepared, but then he notices one of the maids lying dead, and a man standing right before him. He quickly realizes that the family leader's daughter is there, and upon noticing that the girl is dead, Brian understands everything. There is no way he can win against this opponent. The man takes a battle stance, while Brian desperately searches for any way to escape alive, but the man declares that he will not allow the master's daughter to leave this place. At that moment, a blade suddenly comes flying toward the man, who barely manages to dodge it at the last second. Everyone is stunned by what just happened, and the one who appeared is Reynold, Maria's brother. He steps in to face the enemy so his younger sister can escape alive. Brian asks the boy if he is truly sure about this, and with a serious tone, he orders Brian to take Maria and leave as fast as possible. "But young master, are you certain about this? Just go, Brian, get out of here." With that, he grabs the younger sister of his second young master and drags her away. It is incredibly sad, painful, as she watches her entire home collapse, and that is the last time she ever sees her beloved brother. The man then comments that Reynolds' action was admirable, but warns the second son of the Sion family that the Order of Knights shows no mercy. No mercy for what? We have done nothing wrong. That man is Hugo Pagat. He is one of the most powerful knights in the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, Maria is still fleeing alongside Brian. The poor girl cannot stop crying. Even though he does not fully understand everything, he feels an overwhelming rage toward the situation. The scene then shifts back to the present, where he is beside his lady. She is still poisoned and suffering greatly. At that moment, he hears someone say that the guild's investigation results have arrived. It is Alt, who explains that the corpses carry traces of magic. At that moment, Lewin and Ariel try to make sense of what is happening. Then the dwarf suggests that they might be dealing with beast tamers. This information reaches the guild, and everyone there starts forming theories, trying to figure out who is responsible. At that moment, the girls turn toward Brune and ask whether Maria is all right. The dwarf states that if they fail to find an antidote, she will likely lose her life. Brian already knows this very well, so he calls out to Lewin and Miss Ariel. He swallows his pride and asks both of them for help, because otherwise, he will not be able to find a cure. Meanwhile, we are introduced to that elegant and captivating woman. It also becomes clear that she was the one responsible for poisoning Maria. She is seen threatening a man, stating that she had already provided everything they needed. Since she truly delivered all the necessary resources, they should have succeeded in the mission. With an intimidating tone, she demands to know why they failed. The man kneels there, apologizing repeatedly, explaining that a mage interfered, and swearing that if given another chance he will not fail again. However, several of those mercenaries are shown lying dead, and she coldly states that there will be no more chances, as she has already given more than enough. Standing there is Hugo, who begins inspecting one of the bodies and retrieves the antidote. The man then asks the mysterious woman if she still wishes for the mission to be completed. Letting out a light laugh, she answers yes, as there is nothing else left for her to do. Since the surprise attack ended in failure, security within the territory will undoubtedly be tightened. The Hunters Guild will also increase the intensity of their investigation. She is also concerned that the guild might notice she acted on her own, but above all, she does not want to anger a certain individual. And that person is none other than Arise. As she performs a spell with her hand, she comments that this all began as something almost playful, but now there is no turning back. She then opens a portal to leave the area. We also notice that Hugo now bears a scar across his face. He states that he will not accompany her, as he still has unfinished business. It is something he failed to resolve long ago, and it turns out to be connected to Maria. For those who disliked this character before, chances are he has started to win you over. Meanwhile, Brian ends up encountering a group of bandits in the middle of the forest. He proceeds to beat them down. Yeah, bro chose violence without hesitation. All of this is because he wants to know whether they were the ones who created that poison. Besides, bandits usually carry antidotes, and he demands that one of them hand it over immediately. If they refuse, they will be killed. Meanwhile, Lewin watches everything unfold and becomes concerned, as his companion is starting to lose control. At that moment, he tells Brian to calm down a bit. Ariel, on the other hand, is trying to track down the beast tamer. One of the bandits insists that he knows nothing about any beast tamer or poison, but Brian does not believe him. Pointing his sword at him, Brian says that a monster has appeared in the area recently, so they must know something. However, the man swears on his life that he has nothing to do with it, and claims he has no reason to lie. At that moment, Brian prepares to finish him off, but something interrupts him. It is Lewin, stepping in to stop Brian. The boy glares at him angrily, and Lewin tells him not to do it. He reminds him that they came here to find an antidote for Maria, not to attack random people. After all, doing this will not solve anything. Brian gets irritated and even says that Lewin might have to dirty his hands as well. Still, attacking innocent people will not fix the situation. Brian is clearly furious and just wants to vent his anger, so Lewin tells the bandit to run, and the man flees along with his companions. With a serious expression, Brian asks if Lewin is satisfied now, since thanks to him they have lost their chance to reach the beast tamer. According to Brian, Lewin has ruined everything by interfering in his investigation. While they argue, Ariel continues trying to locate the beast tamer's magic. She closes her eyes and focuses deeply until she senses a magical presence. She suddenly shouts that she has found something, surprising both of them. After carefully analyzing it, she pinpoints the direction of the magical trail and says that someone nearby has just used a spell. From a distance, they hear a noise, and she begins heading toward the top of the mountain with the two, already visibly exhausted. Lewin asks Ariel if she is all right, and the girl's legs are trembling from the steep climb and sheer exhaustion. She tells them she will catch up soon, but with Brian feeling irritated and anxious, he rushes ahead and even turns back briefly, saying there is no time to waste. "Hey, slow down, man. You are way too tense," Lewin says as he turns, planning to carry Ariel on his back, but when he looks again, she is gone. Wait, where did she go? Meanwhile, Hugo is seen cleaning his sword. He mentions that he got that scar about 5 years ago, and it was all because of his battle against Reynold, the second son. However, he lets out a laugh, as he genuinely enjoys dangerous battles. Meanwhile, Ariel is seen wandering around, clearly disoriented. She closes her eyes trying to focus, but it is useless, as she can no longer sense that flow of mana. The girl is completely lost at this point. She needs to find Lewin as quickly as possible, but at that moment she hears a noise coming from behind some bushes. It startles her. Meanwhile, Brian continues climbing the mountain, until he reaches a place that leaves him stunned. He recognizes that sword and that sinister face. That man is the knight Hugo, the same one he encountered while escaping from the mansion. The man asks Brian what he is doing there. He never expected this brat to come looking for him. At that moment, Hugo stands up, and Brian notices several lifeless bodies scattered around. That could only mean this man is behind all those crimes. And it is not just one body either. There are many. Yeah, this guy did not come here to talk things out. He even asks if it was this swordsman who did all this, and questions whether he is the beast tamer. Hugo gives no reply, and simply comments that Brian looks desperate for revenge. With a smirk, he asks if the boy truly believes he can defeat him. Meanwhile, Lewin is still searching for Ariel. He shouts in every direction, but no answer comes back. There is no way she got lost that quickly, yet at the same time he is worried about Brian, who climbed that mountain. Now he does not know whether to go after Ariel or chase after Brian. Meanwhile, the red-haired boy attempts to fight Hugo. He moves in, preparing a thrust with his dagger, but Hugo effortlessly dodges. He tries again, but his opponent is far faster. Before he can even see the movement, he is struck directly. The blow deals heavy damage, and blood begins to pour out. Clutching his chest, he struggles to steady himself. Meanwhile, the man casually says he loves combat and that he will never forget that frightened face, since he has an excellent memory. Right after, he asks how Maria is doing after being poisoned. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out the antidote, showing it to Brian. He adds that the only way to save his lady is with that medicine. At that moment, Brian realizes that this bastard is truly behind everything. Hugo then places the antidote on top of a stone. He even mocks the situation, saying she will die in a pathetic way from a goblin's poisoned arrow, even after surviving the mansion attack. To him, it is all incredibly dull. With a crazed expression, he declares that he will end the fight quickly. That comment is meant to provoke Brian, and it works, as he immediately charges forward. Loyalty and courage may be admirable, but in Brian's case, Hugo calls it foolishness. That is what Hugo says. With ease, Hugo disarms the red-haired boy, sending his dagger flying backward. "Did you really think you could face me with such a cheap toy?" The impact is so strong that his hand is left badly injured. It even goes numb. For a brief moment, he lowers his guard because of his rage. He even forgets just how powerful this man truly is. Hugo Pagat, that is his name. This man belongs to the 12 zodiac signs and is also one of the strongest knights in the entire empire. He carries a rather unusual nickname, the Fanatic Duelist. That is because he is obsessed with duels, and the fact that he is still alive proves that he has never lost one. As Brian recalls this information, fear begins to take over him. Hugo starts making jokes, asking if the boy has wet himself and wondering where all that courage from earlier has gone. If he keeps fighting this man, he will die and fail to obtain the cure for Lady Maria. But to give Brian a sliver of hope, Hugo mentions that the scar on his eye was caused by Reynold. Because of that, Brian might at least be able to scratch him a little. However, he remembers that battle fondly, recalling the screams of that boy, and adds that he will do the same to Brian, ending him in a very painful way. The only thing Brian can think about is the antidote he must bring back to Maria. With a twisted laugh, Hugo declares that he will finish this fight in the most painful way possible. With trembling hands, Brian prepares himself to defend. Even so, he knows he must win this battle no matter what, since his lady depends on that medicine. So he throws himself forward with everything he has. He understands that victory is unlikely, but he has no other choice. As he closes the distance, he prepares to strike with his blade. Hugo effortlessly dodges and lands a strike straight into Brian's abdomen. That hit connects cleanly, but the boy plants his feet firmly and pushes forward, trying to land another attack. After evading again, Hugo strikes the other side of his body and then follows up by hitting the boy's leg. He is struck multiple times without even seeing the blade. Because of that, he decides to fall back. Taking a deep breath, he knows this fight will not be easy. Brian asks, "What does this guy think he's doing?" The man lets out a laugh and says he is just making sure his little toy does not break too quickly. That only makes Brian even more furious. He curses at the man, calling him a bastard. With a mocking grin, Hugo says he enjoys opponents who get this angry. At that moment, he prepares to move and charges straight at the redhead. Brian realizes he is about to be hit, and the attack lands directly on him. The blow connects perfectly, moving so fast that Brian cannot even follow it, and the man is already back in his original stance. Meanwhile, Ariel is off somewhere with a small rabbit. She complains, saying she got seriously scared, thinking it was a monster. However, she notices large footprints heading in a direction that seems to lead to an abandoned castle. Maybe the beast tamer is inside that place. Because of that, the girl stands up, saying she will go there. She begins walking slowly, hoping Luan will arrive to help her. Even though she feels a bit nervous, she stays determined, saying she will deal with the monster first and regroup with her team afterward. Meanwhile, poor Brian is in serious trouble. He knows he does not have enough strength to defeat this man. However, Hugo says he will finish things soon, as the fight is already becoming boring. He expected something more entertaining, but this redhead is not as strong as he thought. Filled with anger, Brian says he was careless, but the only thing on his mind is Maria, who will likely die from the poison. Deep down, he has always known he could not defeat this opponent, especially since this is not someone he ever imagined facing. In the end, he feels weak and unable to protect the girl. The man asks if Brian has any last words, but at that moment a rock flies toward him, and it hits him directly. Brian looks to the side and realizes that it is Luan. The impact of the rock is strong enough to injure the man. Angry, he demands to know who this brat thinks he is. "I think I should be asking that, you filthy mutt. Who do you think you are, hurting my friend like that?" Brian shouts for Luan to run, but Hugo kicks the redhead in the face, sending him flying away. Luan yells, asking if Brian is alright. The man places his sword against his head because of the injury. Furious, he says he will make this bastard regret it. Luan immediately questions what nonsense this one-eyed guy is talking about. But at that moment he is surprised, as the man's speed is absurd. Even so, Luan manages to dodge the attack. Not even the one-eyed man expected that. Luan asks why this guy attacked without even talking first. Then he decides to counterattack using his baseball bat. The man does not expect such a powerful strike and gets thrown backward. He has never seen anything like that and wonders if it was magic. No, it is not magic, it is more like pure brute strength. The impact is so strong that it makes his hand tremble. "Hey, what's your deal? You just rushed me without even saying a word? I'm pretty sure this situation is not normal, and now you're going to face the power of my bat." Well, that escalated quickly. The man comments that the weapon is bizarre and that its power is quite unusual. He even says Brian managed to make a very strange friend, cracking his neck. The man admits he was getting bored, but finally he has found an opponent who might give him some entertainment. Hugo charges toward our protagonist, but Luan dodges at the last possible moment. The man grips his blade tightly, and our hero is nearly struck, but at that instant the protagonist tries to close the distance. The man even wonders who this boy is, as his reaction speed is incredible. Luan moves in to strike with his baseball bat. At that moment the man is almost hit, but he manages to block at the last second. The impact is so powerful that it sends him flying backward. He digs his feet into the ground to avoid crashing into the trees. It seems this boy is actually dangerous. Luan's strength is astonishing, enough to make the swordsman feel fear. "If I take a hit like that, I will definitely die." With a grin he says it has been a long time since he felt this way. It had been a long time since he fought a battle where he could actually die. Luan notices that the man's aura has completely changed. Now he carries a killing intent. Hugo leaps forward and tells the boy to brace himself for the worst. He rushes in at full speed and even from a distance manages to land a strike on our protagonist. The blow is so powerful that it makes him spit out blood. In a flashback, the protagonist recalls his kinetic vision. It was an ability that allowed him to precisely and rapidly track moving objects. He had trained it extensively because he used to be a batter in baseball. Returning to the present, we see that he managed to protect the vital part of his body. Hugo tries to understand how the boy reacted in a split second to avoid a fatal strike. "Looks like you've exceeded my expectations, kid." Even so, the slash still grazes his abdomen and shoulder. "If I hadn't blocked that, I would definitely be dead." Deep in thought, our hero tries to figure out a way to defeat this man. Back when he was younger, he often felt discouraged because he could not predict the trajectory of the ball, but his coach told him not to lose hope. After all, he was still young and had plenty of time to train. Even when a pitcher seemed incredibly fast, it was still possible to anticipate the ball's path. Still, Luan kept telling his coach that he just could not do it, no matter how much he trained. However, his coach believed in his potential and told him that there is no pitcher in the world that cannot be overcome. Every pitcher has habits and a specific posture, and beyond that, every person has weaknesses. If you observe carefully, you can identify any opponent's flaws. Looking at this monster before him, Luan tries to figure out what his weakness is. It will not be easy, but he is determined to find it. This man is an orthodox fighter who keeps his sword forward. At that moment, he realizes that the man has a blind spot, since he is blind in his left eye, so essentially the left side of his body is more vulnerable, and that blind spot is quite large. That is exactly why he did not see the rock earlier, since it came from the left side, so now he needs to exploit that blind spot to land a decisive hit. In other words, Luan only has one chance. At that moment, Hugo thrusts forward, but the boy dodges, surprising the swordsman. Right then, Luan spots an opening and attempts to strike, but the man manages to evade. It seems he avoided it precisely through his blind spot. Using a spinning motion, the man tries to split our hero in half, but Luan ducks, and immediately after, the man drives a knee into the boy's face. That blow is brutal, sending him crashing onto his back. His bat is knocked far away. Laughing, Hugo comments that the boy possesses impressive physical abilities. However, that alone is not enough to defeat him in battle. He even says the boy is nothing more than a common thug without technique, and he will finish him right now. He attempts another thrust, but our protagonist manages to dodge. He had picked up some stones from the ground and is ready to use them. At that moment, he throws one of the stones, and the man easily avoids both. He even remarks that the boy is relying on pathetic tricks. However, one of the stones ends up blocking his right eye, his good eye, and that becomes the opening Luan needed to strike with his bat. The man realizes he is in serious trouble as Luan charges up a devastating blow. That stone brushes past his cheek as it flies by, and for a brief instant everything seems to freeze. Luan stands right in front of the man, but we then see that our hero has been struck in the shoulder by the sword, stopping his attack. The man lets out a sigh of relief, as he was just barely saved and even managed to counterattack. He is quite injured from the previous blows, yet still arrogant as he admits it was a good attempt. However, Luan suddenly grabs the man's sword and shouts for Brian to finish him, and Brian appears right behind that bastard. Meanwhile, Alt is out gathering herbs to use as medicine, but he is unsure which ones to pick. He stares at the plants, deep in thought. But the fox girl smacks him on the head with her staff, saying that is not the herb they need. She even warns that picking the wrong one could make Maria's condition even worse. Then she asks Celine if she really believes they can find detox herbs in this area. Celine replies that while searching for herbs, she will also look for the beast tamer. However, the fox girl comments that Celine is probably just trying to gather vegetables for a stew. She even suggests it would be better to pay a traveler to take Maria to an herbalist in another territory to prepare the medicine. But at that moment, they all hear an explosion. They look toward the higher part of the mountain where the sound came from. The fox girl says it must be related to the beast tamer. We then see that the explosion has created a massive cloud of smoke, and the one fighting there causing all that chaos was none other than Ariel. She wanted to wrap up that battle as quickly as possible so she could go help Luan and Brian. However, the worst possible situation ended up happening. She ran into an anti-magic bear. Those massive beasts had extremely high resistance against spell-based attacks. Even so, the girl refused to back down and began preparing a different kind of spell. This one was called Punitive Heavenly Retribution. A surge of intense electrical energy formed above the bear's head and struck it directly. Still, the explosion was enormous, and we see that the bear, despite being hit by the lightning, barely felt the impact, roaring even louder before charging straight at her. Yeah, that thing clearly did not read the take damage manual. The attack from that creature was unbelievably powerful. Even so, the girl managed to defend herself by casting a magical barrier, and right after that she unleashed piercing ice. And this time it actually seemed to work, guys. The monster finally let out a cry of pain. Taking advantage of that opening, she followed up with enveloping cold wave, causing all those ice fragments lodged in the creature to begin freezing it from within. Little by little, the beast started freezing until it turned into a massive block of ice. She was exhausted from using so much mana, collapsing onto the ground as she admitted those spells consumed an enormous amount of energy. Even so, she still needed to reach Luan and Brian as quickly as possible. But suddenly another monster appeared behind her, far stronger than the previous one. At that moment she thought it was the end, since she had no mana left and was facing a creature resistant to magic. The beast moved in to attack, but two arrows suddenly flew in and struck its face. Ariel was stunned, realizing that help had arrived at the very last second. It was Celine, stepping in to save her. At the same time, the fox girl appeared and launched an attack on the creature. However, the monster reacted instantly and blocked it with its arm. The girl realized that the creature's skin was incredibly tough, and Ariel was still down, unable to assist due to her lack of mana. Watt asked if the girl could stand up, and she admitted she had spent too much energy and her body felt weak, so he helped her to her feet while asking where Brian and Luan were. She explained that they had gone toward the beast tamer, but she ended up encountering these monsters along the way. Of course, she conveniently left out the part where she got lost. Looking at that creature, Alt commented that he had never seen anything like it before. The girl responded that this was a bad sign, since that monster was known as a mendigo, a creature that only lived in the northernmost regions of the continent. Alt realized that this had to be a summoned monster controlled by a beast tamer. They would need Ariel's magic to stand a chance, but she was in no condition to cast anything, and even admitted she did not have a single drop of mana left. She even suggested that it would be better for them to run away as fast as possible. She felt sorry, but she could no longer contribute to the fight. However, A insisted that they could not run, since there was no one nearby to ask for help. There were farmhouses in the area with children and elderly people, but going there would only put innocent lives at risk, so their only option was to face the monster, even if it meant risking his own life. Since the girl had no mana left, he told her to head down to the nearest village, where soldiers could be found, and request reinforcements, but she argued that it was too far, and that he would not be able to hold out until then. Even so, he replied that he was fully aware of that. In other words, he was ready to sacrifice his life to protect everyone. She felt the weight of those words, and at that moment, the monster prepared to strike. The fox girl leapt backward and urged them to make a decision quickly, warning that if they kept talking, the monster would kill them all. We can clearly see just how powerful that creature was, as all four of them trembled in fear. And honestly, that thing was ugly as hell. Just looking at its face made Ariel feel uneasy, and after taking a deep breath, she commented on its terrifying resilience. Because of that, she tired quickly and told the others she would not be able to make it down the mountain to seek help. But Alt insisted that reinforcements were necessary, otherwise all four of them would die. Gripping her staff tightly, she said that one of the others could go in her place, while she stayed behind to use whatever little mana she had left. Even if her mana ran out completely and she lost her life, it did not matter, because she had chosen to protect her friends. So the one who ended up running down the mountain was Celine. The girl sprinted in desperation. It would be extremely difficult to reach the next territory and find soldiers for help. However, she suddenly spotted a carriage passing nearby and noticed the emblem of the Adventurers Guild on it. The man driving the wagon was moving along calmly when he suddenly heard someone shouting frantically. It was Celine, asking if they belonged to the Hunters Guild. The man did not quite know how to respond. Then the woman inside pulled back the curtain and asked the driver why he had stopped. The man explained that it was because there was a desperate girl out there. Celine kept insisting that her companions were in danger and even begged him to please help them. The woman maintained a serious expression and noticed that Celine carried a hunter's emblem, so she agreed to assist, saying she could not allow her precious hunters to get hurt. She even asked the archer girl to guide them to the location. When she realized who that person was, Celine became completely flustered. Meanwhile, the others were still fighting against that enormous monster. Ariel was having an extremely hard time, but luckily the fox girl kept stepping in to protect the mage. Alt asked if the red-haired girl was alright, and she replied that she was, thanks to her companions, though the situation was far worse than they had imagined, especially since the monster was practically immune to magic. On top of that, its skin was so thick that blades could barely pierce it. The fox girl even pointed out that if help did not arrive soon, they would lose. Turning toward the elf, they asked if she had any idea how to defeat the creature. She tried to analyze any flaws or weaknesses, and since she had recovered a bit of mana, she said she could cast one more spell. The fox girl insisted that they should bet everything on that single attack. Gripping her halberd tightly, she declared that she would clear a path. Right then, the monster suddenly charged forward. The two warriors leapt into action, trying to buy time as they prepared to strike the creature. With her weapon, she managed to hit the monster's face, while Alt aimed for its leg. All of this was done to stall for time so the elf could finish casting her spell. However, the two quickly realized that their combined attack had caused absolutely no damage. It was unbelievable, as the creature was far more durable than they had expected. Letting out a roar, the monster knocked both of them away with ease. Meanwhile, Ariel continued focusing on her spell. The fox girl shouted, asking why the elf had not released the spell yet. But it was still not fully charged, and because of the delay, the monster was already closing in, nearly about to devour her. As she opened her eyes, she realized just how dire the situation had become. Suddenly, a red streak sliced through the air, cutting the creature clean in half. The speed of that strike was so immense that it created a vortex of wind, even throwing the girl backward. At that moment, someone landed right in front of her and asked if the elf was all right. It was that same girl who had been traveling with the horned woman. With a soft, cheerful laugh, the girl said she was glad that no one had been hurt. Ariel could not understand what had just happened, while the girl kept smiling sweetly. "Wait, you were the one who saved me, is that right?" The fox girl was completely confused. What just happened? Alt then asked if it was really that girl who had appeared and saved them. Ariel confirmed it and even stated that this person had saved all of their lives. Alt immediately expressed his gratitude, saying that if she had not arrived in time, they would all have died. However, he soon noticed something that left him shocked. She carried a platinum emblem. That meant she was a high-ranking hunter. At that moment, someone else appeared, saying she was glad she had not arrived too late. It was that horned woman, casually radiating an overwhelming aura. Yeah, you can tell she's not a background character. Celine was relieved, letting out a small laugh as she began celebrating the victory with her friends. The woman asked Ariel if she had been the one to freeze that bear and even pointed at the creature, saying it was impressive. "Was that really your doing?" The entire group confirmed that it was, and thanked both of them for the help. But judging by her presence alone, it was clear that this woman was different from everyone else, prompting them to ask who she was. The woman apologized for not introducing herself earlier and explained that she was a guild master. Her name was wrong, and she belonged to the dragon tribe. Upon hearing that, everyone was left stunned. The Dragon Guild had a single purpose: to protect all races from monsters. Under that noble mission, it had grown into a global organization that transcended the interests of individual nations. Within the guild, hunters took on many different roles, including combat specialists who directly hunted monsters. There were also support roles, consisting of various assistants. However, the badge ranking system was based solely on a hunter's skill and reliability. There were also many other positions, such as receptionists, treasurers, branch managers, and more. But the highest authority within the guild, overseeing both hunters and support staff, was held by the 3 guild masters. Each one governed a region of the continent, and since there were only 3, that meant this woman was extremely powerful. She stared seriously at the frozen bear. And what struck her as most unusual was that such a massive creature rarely appeared in forests within the southern continent, and that creature as well, the one they had just faced, normally only lived in polar regions. That meant this situation was likely caused by human intervention. She also wondered how someone managed to relocate monsters without being detected. Because of that, she began suspecting the red-haired mage, our dear Ariel, and even stated that she would like to take them in for questioning. She needed to hear a full explanation about everything that had happened. Everyone there grew tense, but Ariel said that now was not the time, especially since her companions were in danger while searching for the beast tamer. The woman then asked where those friends of hers were. "Wait, did you just say beast tamers?" Ariel confirmed that she had indeed said that, explaining they were investigating the sudden appearance of monsters in that region. Since it was an official incident, the guildmaster asked whether she had been investigating on her own or if she had proper authorization from the guild. Because they had acted independently, the redhead froze in shock, realizing that what they did went against the rules. "Did you have permission from the guild or not? If you had identified possible suspects, you should have reported it to the guild first, instead of conducting your own investigation," Celine quietly whispered to Alt, saying she hoped Lewin would not get into trouble because of this. Hunters were forbidden from getting involved in matters tied to national or international interests. She said this in a very serious tone, but since the situation had already escalated, she decided she would try to help them. Then she asked Ariel again where her companions were. The girl explained that they had gone after the beast tamer, but she ended up getting separated from them. The woman became irritated, thinking Ariel was being irresponsible, and when asked which direction they had gone, the girl hesitated, stuttering nervously as she admitted she had a terrible sense of direction. Everyone was left stunned. "Wait, what? You do not even know which way they went?" The scene shifts back to our protagonist, who was still gripping the sword. Brian appeared behind Hugo, ready to deliver the finishing blow. "Now you die, you bastard." However, Hugo was not someone easy to defeat, and quickly struck the redhead with an elbow. The dagger only grazed his abdomen, and both of them struggled against each other, trying to overpower the other's attack. Shouting, Hugo prepared to throw a punch, but Lewin was faster and landed a direct hit right on the man's face. "Are you going down the easy way or the hard way?" From that heavy punch, Hugo lost consciousness. To him, losing like that was completely unacceptable. And just like that, he collapsed hard onto the ground. At last, Hugo had been defeated. The sword was still lodged in Lewin's shoulder. Brian asked if the boy was all right. Yeah, he definitely did not look fine at all. Right after that, he pulled the blade out and tossed it aside. Letting out a deep breath, he admitted that the fight had been extremely difficult. Then he sat down on the ground, completely drained. Hugo remained unconscious, and at that moment his baseball bat began to transform. "Do not tell me you are about to do what I think you are." That is exactly what was happening, guys. The baseball bat was about to try and devour that human, already lunging forward with its mouth wide open. Brian, who had never seen this bizarre bat creature before, stood there trying to process what was happening as blue flames began to engulf the man. However, our protagonist quickly grabbed that little ghost-like entity. "Hold on a second. You think you can just go around devouring anyone you want?" Brian kept asking what on earth that thing was, while our hero slammed the ghost down, struggling to restrain it. And it was not easy at all, since the spirit was surprisingly strong. But at that moment he was caught off guard as Ariel arrived alongside the guildmaster, both of them shocked by the scene. "Wait, what are you guys doing here?" The woman even removed her glasses and questioned what kind of strange power that was. Then she noticed Hugo lying on the ground along with the two boys. And with that, we reach the end of part 2 of this story, guys. I do not know about you, but I am really enjoying it so far. So if you made it this far, leave a comment. Hero of the Bat. The platform is not really recommending our videos right now, so please, drop a like to help boost the channel. It costs nothing and helps out a lot. Also, leave some hype if you can. I will leave 2 recommended videos here on the card that I am sure you will enjoy, so I will see you there. That is all for now. Thanks and see you next time, everyone.